Okay, let's just jump right into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at a massive, structural, and honestly fascinating geopolitical tech shift that is quietly but forcefully sweeping right across Europe. We're talking about the very foundation of digital sovereignty. Major European governments are fundamentally rethinking the software that runs their most critical systems. And look, this isn't just about a few tech enthusiasts tweaking their laptops on a weekend. We are talking about entire nations changing how they operate at a base level.
Just listen to this staggering number to start us off. 30,000. That's the exact number of government PCs that the northern German state, or Schleswig-Holstein, is pulling entirely off of Microsoft Windows and Office. We're talking civil servants, judges, police officers, all of them officially transitioning to Linux and LibreOffice. Now, what's genuinely wild here is that this isn't some tiny pilot program or a beta test. They're already 80% migrated, with a hard deadline for the rest. For 2 whole decades, their entire state administration ran on Windows by default. That era? It's officially over.
So, Section 1, the Great European Migration, governments logging off.
Now, you might be thinking, well, maybe Schleswig-Holstein is just one isolated anomaly of a German state. But actually, no. We are witnessing a massive, coordinated exit away from proprietary American software ecosystems. It's literally a domino effect across the continent. Look at the sheer scale here. Austria's armed forces, they've already finished moving 16,000 military computers over to LibreOffice. Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs is saying goodbye to Microsoft and switching to Linux in 2025. Italy's Ministry of Defense crunched the numbers and is projecting 29 million euros in savings by moving to open source. And France, this one is crazy. Their gendarmerie, the actual national police force, has been running 97% of its 103,000 PCs on a custom Ubuntu Linux distribution for over a decade, without incident. The scale is breathtaking, and it's all being driven by this intense desire for national security and total uncompromised control over the software running a country's most sensitive infrastructure.
Moving on to Section 2, the 3-word catalyst, uncovering the default tax.
So why is this rapid acceleration happening right now, today? It really boils down to 2 undeniable realities that governments just couldn't ignore anymore: hidden financial drains and some pretty alarming legal vulnerabilities. Let's tackle the money first. 15 million euros. That is the staggering amount Schleswig-Holstein revealed they were bleeding to Microsoft every single year just for software licenses. For a state of 2.9 million people, sending 15 million euros annually straight to Redmond, Washington, well, it breaks down to a hidden default tax of roughly 500 euros per government employee every single year. And for decades, because Microsoft was just the default choice, this massive bill was essentially invisible. Nobody audited it, nobody questioned it, until they finally did. And look what happens when you actually do the math. On one side, you've got the Microsoft default, this ongoing, never-ending bleed of 500 euros per seat, per year, totally coupled with foreign cloud telemetry. On the other side, the open-source alternative. The one-time cost for Schleswig-Holstein to migrate completely off Microsoft, and we're talking hardware, training, support contracts, developing replacements, the whole shebang, was just 9 million euros. Think about that for a second. They were paying 15 million a year. The total cost to walk away was 9 million. The migration literally paid for itself in under 12 months. After year 1, it is pure unadulterated savings for the taxpayers.
But as compelling as the math is, the money wasn't even the final nail in the coffin. The legal story here is just as wild. In March 2024, the European Data Protection Supervisor ruled that the EU Commission's own use of Microsoft 365 violated data protection laws. Right around the same time, the Interoperable Europe Act kicked in, legally binding EU member states to actively seek platform independence and open standards. But the true breaking point? The 2018 U.S. Cloud Act. This American statute basically says that any U.S.-based cloud provider can be compelled to hand over customer data to U.S. authorities with a warrant, completely regardless of where that data is physically sitting. So Frankfurt, Paris, Dublin? It doesn't matter.
And this legal reality completely collided with European sovereignty in June 2025 during a French Senate hearing. Anton Carneo, who was Microsoft France's Director of Public and Legal Affairs, was testifying under oath. A senator asked him a very simple question. Could he guarantee that the personal data of French citizens stored in Microsoft's cloud would never be transmitted to the U.S. government without explicit consent from the French state? His answer? 3 devastating words. No, I cannot. Under oath, a senior Microsoft legal officer confirmed that the U.S. Cloud Act completely overrides every single European data boundary program and sovereign cloud promise the company had ever made. For European governments, digital sovereignty suddenly wasn't just a fun political buzzword anymore. It was an absolute, physical and legal requirement.
Okay, Section 3, Funding the Open Future, beyond just using free software.
Now, taking back that sovereignty doesn't just mean abandoning the old systems, it means actively building the new ones. European governments aren't just downloading a bunch of free software off the internet and calling it a day, they're aggressively financing its future. Take 1.28 million euros, for example. That's the exact amount Germany's sovereign tech fund just injected directly into the KDE free and open source software community. KDE is the desktop environment that powers Plasma. And fun little side note, if you're a gamer, that's the exact same desktop mode that powers the Steam Deck. Governments are realizing that if open source code is going to run their nations, they absolutely have to pay to reinforce that foundation.
And they are being extremely specific about what this money is actually for. The Sovereign Tech Fund stated they're investing here because the desktop is still the main way everyday people access digital services and hold their personal data. So this 1.28 million euros is earmarked to harden the infrastructure. We're talking better session recoverability if a crash happens, putting in secure factory reset functionality, enhancing the data backup and security systems, and building much tighter integration with containerized Flatpak packages. Why does this matter? Because they are taking a platform built by a community, and they're directly financing its evolution into a deeply secure, enterprise-grade, nation-state-ready operating system.
Section 4. Vulnerabilities and backdoor theories. The reality check. All right, we do need a bit of reality check here. Ditching Microsoft definitely doesn't mean you're magically escaping all security threats. Open source provides incredible transparency, but transparency requires relentless vigilance. The source material highlights 3 massive verified vulnerabilities that actually hit the Linux kernel simultaneously recently. You've got Dirty Frag, which is a privilege escalation flaw, letting attackers mess with the kernel cache. Then there's Fragnesia, which writes to read-only files to get root access. And SSH Keys Sign Pawn, exposing root-owned files to unprivileged users. Because Linux runs basically the whole world's infrastructure, and with AI tools constantly scanning open code bases now, vulnerabilities are going to be found. The big difference is that the code is open. Third-party researchers, and yes, governments can audit the code themselves instead of sitting around waiting for a corporate patch. But it absolutely proves that open code still demands intense, constant scrutiny.
And that transparency naturally leads to intense public scrutiny of government actions, too. Which brings us to this wild but heavily debated community theory circulating in the Linux world right now. Is the German government attempting to build a backdoor into Arch Linux? Now, we are remaining strictly impartial here, just explaining the source material and the debate itself. But the mechanics of this theory are just fascinating to unpack.
So the whole debate stems from this one single action. The German Sovereign Tech Agency funded a $500,000 project to rewrite the package management tools for a specific distribution, Arch Linux, using a newer programming language called Rust. Now, critics in the community argue that governments rarely just drop $500,000 without a clear return on investment. Since this project theoretically replaces something that already works fine with something that isn't even finished yet, some folks have posited a theory. They're wondering if funding a compiler rewrite could secretly be a vector for a government to quietly inject undetectable spy code right into the foundation of an operating system.
To even understand why the community entertains a theory like this, you have to go back to an almost mythic piece of tech history. In 1984, Unix legend Ken Thompson revealed he had injected a backdoor into the Unix compiler. It was this self-replicating piece of code that gave him root login access. The brilliant and honestly terrifying part? The backdoor injected the vulnerability and then deleted its own source code from the compiler, but told the compiler to secretly reinsert the vulnerability every single time it compiled itself. It was virtually undetectable. It sat there like a ghost in the machine for years. Now, there is absolutely zero proof Germany is doing anything like this with Rust and Arch Linux. But that awe-inspiring 1984 hack is exactly why parts of the tech community remain deeply, deeply skeptical whenever a government invests in core compiler technologies. Trust is just hard to come by when the stakes are national security.
Moving on to Section 5, your own escape hatch, bringing it home.
So, what does this massive geopolitical chess match over software actually mean for you? Well, look at how these timelines are converging. While European states are fleeing Microsoft, regular consumers are staring down their own forced migration right around October 14, 2025. That is the exact date Microsoft officially ends free support for Windows 10. Hundreds of millions of perfectly functioning PCs are going to be labeled obsolete overnight by the manufacturer, and the forced upgrade path? It's Windows 11. Which requires highly specific hardware chips, mandatory Microsoft accounts, and baked-in telemetry, like that Recall AI feature that continuously takes screenshots of your activity. The exact same foreign data dependency and forced upgrade cycles that the German government just voted to escape, everyday consumers are literally being pushed into right now.
But everyday people are noticing, and they're already following the government's lead. Check this out. In July 2022, desktop Linux market share was sitting at a quiet 2.76%. By July 2024, it jumped to 4.4%. And as of June 2025, it hit 4.7%. Now sure, that might sound kind of small compared to the giant that is Windows, but in the scale of global desktop computers, that is a steady, historic, and frankly, massive influx of users deciding they want to reclaim their own digital sovereignty.
And here is absolutely the best part. You have the exact same escape hatch that the German government used, and for you, it costs literally nothing to try. The sources map out a super practical approach if you want to test this out today. Step 1. Download a beginner-friendly distribution. Think Ubuntu, Linux Mint, or Zorin OS. Step 2. Flash it right onto a standard USB thumb drive. Step 3. Plug it in, reboot your computer, and just run the operating system directly off the USB stick. It does not touch your Windows installation at all. You can test your Wi-Fi, browse the web, see if your machine feels faster, all without risking a single personal file. It is a completely zero-risk way to experience exactly what a computer feels like when it isn't constantly trying to sell you a subscription.
Which really leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. As entire governments are spending millions to escape these proprietary ecosystems, and as your own perfectly good hardware faces forced obsolescence, when your software becomes obsolete by default, who really owns your computer? The dominoes are falling across Europe right now, and the tools to take back your own digital independence are sitting right there, just waiting for you to use them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the defaults.